Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so excited today to be talking to some of the incredible artisans behind the show Hacks. We are joined today by production designer Alec Contestable, costume designer Kathleen Felix-Hager, cinematographer Adam Bricker, editor Jessica Brunetto, hairstylist Jennifer Bell, and sound mixer John W. Cook II. And Alec, starting with you, I wanted to talk a little bit about the sets and your approach for the season, because obviously the show is going out on the road, and I believe there were upwards of 130 different locations in the entire season, which is a huge undertaking. And it was a mix of on-location sites and studios spaces that you were building out. And so I was just really interested, when you're starting to work with that many locations, and particularly because you're trying to represent so many different physical locations of where this tour is going, what your kind of initial approach and like breakdown of figuring out what the unique identity of every single one of those was going to look like.
No, that was a very important and unique, aspect of the season. Season one took place pretty much all in Vegas, and the season two really threw all of that out. We're on a road trip. We had really no permanent set. Our most permanent set was the interior of the tour bus, but we really shot that for 4 days over like 2 weeks. So it was just kind of speckled in. It really didn't help us in the traditional sense of, you have an apartment or a house or an office that you're in every single episode. We really had a new show to do every single episode, more or less. And yes, we had almost 130 different sets and locations. Some of these we built, some we didn't. And it was really interesting, like why we would choose to build versus, find that location. And we did we did big sets that like the Crystal Shop, which was a bit of an undertaking for a scene that lasted about a minute and a half and shot over half a day. We built, a full-on crystal shop with thousands and thousands of crystals. We had a backing. We had to have a stunt in there where we threw crystals. We couldn't shoot that at a real store. But it was, like all of this work and weeks of planning and design go into a 1 minute scene, or we do little bathroom sets that are just like, a 3-walled corner shot when the boy looks at Ava in the bathroom, which we shoot over a few hours. And then on the other side of that is, where do we find locations that are going to fit kind of these unique identities of America? And one of the big design challenges we had this season was to really, make it feel like we're in Sedona, but we're shooting this, off the Pear Blossom Highway, or, we're on the East Coast, we're in Memphis, but we have to shoot this in downtown Hollywood because we have to find the Memphis, parking lot linked up with a theater, linked up with, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what of these other, locations we had to, match up with. Our location manager, Kyle Suker, did an amazing job. He was on season 1, and I got to work with him on a show called Black Monday a few years ago. So we had a great relationship, and really, he was very much part of that creative team there. So yeah, that's kind of a broad array of the challenges we had.
Yeah. No, those details are so great. And Kathleen, coming over to you and talking about the costumes, I wanted to talk a little bit about Deborah's arc this season and kind of how that related to a lot of the costume design, because so much of it is her reworking the identity of her show and of her comedy and finding a different voice and tone to that. And so I was interested how you went into the season approaching that narrative arc that she's going on as a character and how that influenced some of the specific choices and looks, because even, her going onto a cruise ship looks very different to her spending time in her home a lot of time off stage in season 1.
Yeah, I mean, the whole season was super fun for me because they went on the road, and there was a lot of discussion about what Deborah's look would be when she's in these little comedy clubs. And I still wanted to keep aspects of her Vegas sort of bling, but just very subtle. And so we sort of came up with this uniform of her being in like black pants and a black tank, and then she would just have this array of blazers that she would pop on, particularly because the way we shot block shooting and shooting so many different episodes at the same time, and all those little pops of the comedy club, we often shot them like over one day. So it just made it so much easier time-wise to have a sort of a quicker change for her. And then then there would be maybe a subtle hair change that Jen would do. And then also speaking to Alec's point of sort of trying to define a place, we spent a lot of time on the background artists to try to give the feel of the different cities we were in, the different environments, like especially at like, the state fair. That was a different look for Deborah Vance because, she had like denim and I don't know if you ever saw them on camera, but she had like electric blue cowboy boots. And so we tried to speak to like the tone of the city that we were in, and also help to tell the story of the place where we were.
And then Adam, coming over to you in terms of cinematography, what's so striking about the cinematography and the directing of the show is that it's so cinematic. And even when we go back to that very first opening shot at the beginning of season 1, it sounds like so many of the specific details were like interlaced, and the idea of that being a one shot was in the script from the beginning. And so when you first came on board the show for season 1, how did that really influence a lot of the language that you've wanted to bring forward as a cinematographer on the show, just with that being the initial kind of way that we were all carried into the series and knowing that it was going to be this very cinematic approach to the show?
Yeah, I mean, the scripts for season 1, especially that first pilot script, those opening pages, they're incredible, and they're so visual, and Paul, Jen, and Lucia just do a wonderful job, writing these scripts, but sort of interlacing them with visual storytelling throughout. So I think they're a thrill to read, and sort of they lay the cookie crumbs of the visuals there for you, which is wonderful. And I think we were, all of us here were excited about the opportunity to use our craft to sort of support the storytelling, and these scripts just give us a great opportunity for that.
That's really great. And Jessica, in terms of editing, I wanted to talk about improv on the show alongside the role of editing, because there are moments where they're filming scenes and they'll try different alts and, allow the cast to kind of ad lib a little bit. And it sounds like in particular, like Jimmy and Kayla is a space where those two characters get to kind of explore and have some really great moments of that. But obviously then it's not just a case of, is this funny? Does this, is this an enjoyable scene to watch between two characters that are doing this? But it's also, does it fit structurally? Does it fit narratively? Is there even time for this? If we're going to add this, then maybe we have to take something away. And so I was really interested in how you approach when there are those moments, particularly taking the idea of like Jimmy and Kayla, for example, where you kind of go, okay, this is worth adding some extra time and this really fits into the structure of a scene, versus moments where however much you'd love to include it, it just kind of can't pigeonhole into it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's definitely part of the fun of my job is that I get to explore all this footage, and particularly all this like funny behind the scenes stuff that not many people get to see. And I really want to elevate and highlight not only the script, but the performances, right? I mean, we have such a talented group of writers and actors, and like, why not let them shine within the boundaries of, staying true to what who their characters are and what the story is we're trying to tell. I would say like one, setting up that in the premiere episode of season 2, the HR scene, the first HR scene, I mean, there was so much footage and there was so much great footage, but we kept having to remind ourselves, like, does this feel real still, even within the ridiculousness of like the characters acting out? Like, they are still in a professional environment, they are still in a HR meeting. So like, if there was anything that like crossed that line that was too big or too broad, we definitely pulled back on. So it's always about finding the sweet spot, and like finding stuff and moments where you get to let the actors be a little bigger, but it helps the overall like punch of the scene and the story again. And like it is a little bit of freedom then to, like, some of those scenes will restructure the bites a little bit depending on the improv, or we'll really dig for like the best looks and like physical reactions, where where at the outset you could say this is a really simple scene. It's one person at a desk and two people across from them, but there's so much subtlety happening that those scenes actually sometimes take way longer to construct in the edit room than some of like the bigger blocking scenes and whatnot. So but it's a joy, honestly, to try stuff. Even if like you go down the wrong path, it's still like, it's so enjoyable. Like, I'm so lucky to do what I do.
That's so great. And Jennifer, in terms of hair on the show and talking about working with Jean Smart and Deborah's look, I love that there's kind of like the stage look and then there's the offstage look, but there's still a lot of crossover. There's still a lot of formality to her as a character in the way that she dresses and the way that she presents herself to the world, even when she's off stage. But then there are those moments where we get to see her strip down a little bit more. And so how do you kind of approach those different layers of, okay, this is stage Deborah, this is Deborah off stage, but still kind of in the public eye. And then these are what the private moments are going to look like so that we have these kind of different looks and feels for her.
Well, it kind of is a fluid thing. It's, it happens sometimes at the last minute. We have, the block shooting limits me as far as, how many different looks I can have. But it just, it's about looking ahead at the script and talking to Jean and figuring out, and Kathleen, and figuring out like what the mood is for, and she usually keeps her updo. Like we decided to keep the updo for all of the looks that she was doing out in the clubs to keep continuity there. And then, we'd change it up. And sometimes it got very confusing. And, and sometimes like I'd be like, well, maybe she should have had her hair down there. And then you just kind of have to go with the flow. So, it's a challenge, but, the scripts are amazing and a joy to read, and a joy, working with Kathleen has just been amazing. And Jean too, she's so fun and loves to experiment. And so it's pretty much a dream job.
Amazing. I love hearing that. And John, in talking about a lot of your role in terms of sound, one of the things is watching Deborah go on this journey of kind of finding a new connection through her comedy and through the stories that she's telling on stage. And a huge part of how we kind of feel that connectivity and that the moments where something's really working or the moments where something just isn't quite connecting in the room is through the sound, and the sounds that we're getting from the audience alongside her performance. And so I was interested in some of the intricacies that came into play, particularly this season, because there's so many snippets of that, and it's just these very short moments of sometimes seeing one line of dialogue of delivery on stage, getting a sense of kind of the sound of the audience and kind of how they're feeling in the room, and that's telling us so much about Deborah and where this journey is going for her.
Yeah, it's really fun to shape those crowd reactions. Let me first say it's great to meet all of you. There's so when the show comes to me, I'm just like putting this icing on the cake that you guys have created, and it's such a pleasure to meet some of you. I know there's hundreds or there's so many people to thank, but it's great to meet y'all. The crowd shaping is something I love to do. Traditionally, a lot of times you have cut crowds where, like in sound, there's two mixers mixing side by side. Besides, after the production mixer gets through mixing all the sound on the set, and Jim Lakin had his own challenges with block shooting and so many different locations. When it comes to me, there's a lot of cleanup and a lot of stuff that I need to do dialogue wise to make the show sound consistent across all these different locations and try to make it sound good. But the crowd stuff is always a lot of fun for me because in post-production, there's an effects mixer that I work side by side with, Ben Wilkins, and he has the cut crowds where an effects editor will cut crowd reactions basically. And then on my side, I have something called Loop Group, which is where a group of actors look at Jessica's final cut in a studio, and they see what the background artists are doing on screen, and they create sort of scripts for themselves, and they record all that good stuff individually. So I have that on my console, and then we have good production effects as well that Jim Lakin has recorded on set. And I think they made an effort to really get the crowds, because there was a lot of background actors on some of those sets, and I think they actually rolled sound on some of that stuff just to get the good authentic stuff. And so I put all that stuff together and try to track with, Jessica's help and with obviously Jen, Paul, and Lucia's guidance. We really try to track what Deborah Vance is jokes are killing and which are bombing, and every single thing in between. And in the show that we got the nomination for, the cruise ship show, it's a wonderful journey from killing at first to being completely bombing at the end. So we get to kind of do everything in between.
I love that, and so many of you were bringing up block shooting on the show, and essentially filming scenes and working on scenes across multiple episodes at the same time. And, one of the gifts is having Lucia and Paul directing every episode, I think, except the finale this season. And I was interested in some of the ways that block shooting for all of you can be a really beneficial thing, because you're kind of getting this idea of the overall arc and structure across a few episodes at a time, but also some of the challenges that come with that. You're going into so many locations, there's so many different looks, and you're juggling so many more balls by working on multiple episodes at the same time. So I was just interested if any of you have anything to kind of share in regards to some of the challenges, but some of the benefits of that.
I found it very challenging. I think I'm sure all departments found it very challenging. We started off, I think we were doing episodes 1 through 4, right? I think we were doing bits and pieces of 1 through 4. So I had to put together costumes, at least for our principals, for all those episodes. And sometimes without seeing Alex's sets, and that was difficult. And sometimes it would just be up to like the miracle of the gods that, it all worked out. Sometimes I'd go to set and I'd be like, oh my God, I don't know how that happened, but it seemed to work. And I think it was very challenging, for us at the beginning. And I think I had an ungodly amount of costumes at the beginning of the season to start with. And then to add, on top of that, then have all the guest stars added in. The thing about working with all these people is that it's very challenging, but also I feel like we all like have each other's backs. I feel like I can go to Adam or Alec or Jen, like we can all like help each other. And like, if there's something that comes up, it's like, instead of panicking, you can kind of, walk your way through it and kind of figure out a solution to something if there's a problem. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I can jump in and apologize, I guess, Kathleen. I know Kyle and I, we're just trying to find as many locations as we could with everything we looked at. There was one example is like when you shoot downtown, that's always expensive just because there's no parking and the locations are expensive. But we knew we really, really wanted to shoot the Alexandria Hotel for the Sotheby's auction scene. But we had to because that scene, Adam, I know we shot Sotheby's and then we did 2 restaurants that day. Was there anything else or was it just that? Because
I feel
a lot.
I just remember on that day, okay, we have this one fall room. What else can we shoot in here? And we scouted the entire Alexandria. Then we went across the street to we know there's one restaurant across the street. And then on our scout, we realized, oh wait, the side, there's an outdoor dining area now because of COVID. So we can use that for a second restaurant. And for some reason, I feel that there was a 4th thing that we shot that day too. I just can't remember.
It's all a blur.
It's all a blur because it was just every day was all right, we're doing 3 different scenes in 3 different parts of the country, and half the time it's day and night or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's sort of obviously it's the nature of the beast, and I don't know. I sort of like that, like putting the pieces of the puzzle together from a scheduling perspective and finding these locations and weighing the pros and cons of what worked best together creatively. I think like Alec, you and Kyle did just a wonderful job tackling that throughout the season, and it's great.
Yeah, it was a fun challenge because I know every location, like I know I was going through like closets, just like what's behind this door, what could we shoot here, and then we found the storage room where Ava gets her dad's ashes from what's his name, the guy who works at I forgot the character's name, but like that was at the Long Beach Performing Arts Center in like a storage closet that we completely emptied and filled with a bunch of stuff. It was like, oh, we can shoot that here now. This is great. Lots of that kind of stuff just throughout the whole season.
Yeah, I kind of go back to like, I really tried to protect my initial reads of the script. I get mostly for like selfish purposes, because like the scripts are so good and like fun to read. But I think like I find personally, like if I really take the time to like do a ton of just like purely creative prep during that period and like track a through line as to like what I want the visuals to be for this episode, like whenever things get messed up and the schedule's all over the place and we're jumping all over the map, you sort of have like a North Star, which is these initial creative thoughts you had on the script.
I think it's worth mentioning too, when I was cutting the pilot, they were shooting episodes 1 through 3. So I don't know if some of you remember that, but that was so informative in the edit room. I was cutting 1 and 3 at the same time while another editor was working on 2. And we would be watching each other's scenes because we're still trying to figure out so much about like dialing in the tone of the show, or what music are you using and that's working, and like all these different things, or what coverage are people gravitating towards the most. I mean, I find that this show lives in medium shots a lot more than close-ups, for example, to really be able to feel the environments, feel the costumes, and everything really comes alive. So that was a really interesting process for me. Some pilots are totally isolated and you're not making the other episodes. So I think overall it worked out really good. But then another challenge was our Las Vegas unit was at the very end, right? So we're building this show about Las Vegas, and like there's not a lot of Las Vegas on the screen just yet. So I think that like creatively we all like did our best to like bridge the gaps between like what footage we know was coming. And I think we also try not to I would say we try sometimes not to watch the episodes front to back too much too soon when we know other pieces are coming, so we can have fresh eyes to feel it, to see if something needs adjustments or reordering and whatnot.
And also kind of talking about you're bringing up there some of the consistencies of the visual language, and again kind of going back to the fact that Paul and Lucia are show running alongside Jen, but also directing on the show. And I was interested in how that's a huge benefit for all of you as well in the work that you're doing, because it seems like, okay, they know and understand the reason for different character looks. They're going to have certain ideas about the visual language and where the camera should be. There's certain things in the footage, I imagine, that feel very kind of like at home and consistent. And so kind of with the second season of the show and with their hands kind of touching directorially, what are some of the benefits and ways that that's really helped a lot of you and your departments?
I can say like the block shooting for hair is challenging because it was like doing theater, because it was quick changes and you had to think ahead. And I'm with Kathleen. It's like sometimes we'd show up on set and go, how did that happen? So, I mean, it was scary, but it was fun in that, high adrenaline kind of thing. But the good thing is that Paul and Lucia, and Jen, they always have an answer. If you go and sit, you're confused or you don't really know the arc of the story right at that point, they could always give you an answer. So that was very helpful. and working closely with Kathleen, and but it for me it's limiting the block shooting, but I just keep asking for more wigs and they keep saying yes. So as long as I can think ahead, and get the wigs ready ahead of time, we can change them, so that's worked out great. And Jean loves her changes, so.
I think, working with Jen and Paul and Lucia, I had not worked with them before. So season 1 was the first time I had worked with them. And, there's always a learning curve when you're working with new people, but I feel like we worked out the kinks in season 1. So season 2, I think we understood each other, and I understood the story they were telling or wanted to tell visually. So by season 2, I think that our language was easy, and it just made working together they have such a clear vision, I think, for the story they want to tell. So I think that I just approached my job is just to help them visually, my costumes are a layer in telling the story. So I feel like they, if there's ever a question I have, or a decision that needs to be made, they're super accessible and very, they have a very clear vision. So that's helpful to me. Sometimes they let me run with something that they're like, we don't really understand this character, so run with it. But like other characters, they're very specific on, and they have a very specific vision. So my job is to, interpret that for them. And I think by season 2, the language and the communication was much better. We understood each other. So that was the process of season 2 for me, actually.
Same on the mixed stage. It was not that the decision making or the process was any quicker, but everyone working with someone new for the first time, I'm sure in all of your crafts, and certainly with mine in mixing, you work with someone for the first time, it takes a little time for them to start to trust. And it was great kicking off season 2, where, we're gonna jump in. We got a ton of work to do. It's gonna take a little while to get where we need to, but we know that you'll get there, which is it's a nice part of the job.
I've always liked that. Oh, so sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say that I just echoing off of what others have said. I think like the fact that Paul, Jen, and Lucia have such a strong and clear vision. It's at the same time, I think they give, speaking for myself, like they give you a lot of creative freedom and the opportunity to sort of explore different avenues. But I always come back to the fact that their vision is so clear that gives me the confidence, I think, just knowing sort of that they have my back creatively, that they're you can take risks and explore a different direction. But they're always gonna sort of be there to sort of guide you on the right path, which I don't know. I find it very freeing.
Yeah, I like that energy and momentum it also builds, because there are 3 of them, and sometimes I don't always get to work with all 3 of them at once. Sometimes it'll be individual sessions or 2 of the 3 of them, and I really just feel like we get to explore what the best version of each episode is that way. And there's like less of like a mental fatigue, because we're almost trying to always like one up each other of like, can we make this cut even better, in this next session? So, and yeah, it's really helpful. Everything that everyone has said, like that they like do agree, and that there is, even though there's 3 of them, it does feel like a singular vision, which is really, kudos to them as creative partners.
I really, really love that, and appreciate you all sharing these details from the second season and working on the show so much. Congratulations on everything season 2 and all the incredibly well-deserved Emmy nominations for the show right now. And thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.